Welcome into the His and Hers podcast. I'm Zach Bennett alongside my sister Paige. And today we are previewing an NFL week 4. Yes, we're already going to be 4 weeks into the NFL season. We have a bunch of storylines to cover, a great matchup between Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes that will happen in Tampa Bay, and much more, beginning with the 7:30 a.m. kick with the Minnesota Vikings, New Orleans Saints, and finishing with Sunday Night Football. Again, a great week 4 slate of action. We'll cover all of that and more here on this episode of the His and Hers podcast. All right, Paige, we are filming during the Thursday night football game between the Cincinnati Bengals and Miami Dolphins. So you'll catch an instant reaction through the things going on. It's currently in the fourth quarter. Like I mentioned, we have our first London Europe game of the year between the Vikings and the Saints that kicks off at 9:30 Eastern time. A full slate of games for this week and some really good matchups between some pretty prominent teams. One that you wouldn't have thought of that, be kind of a game to look forward to. The Jaguars, Eagles, the Bills, Ravens is a really good one. The Cardinals, Panthers, kind of a loser leaves town scenario. Same with the Broncos, Raiders, even though the Broncos are 2-1, feels like it's a lot worse than that. Patriots, Packers, a good one. And then that Sunday night football between Chiefs, Bucks, and Monday night between the Rams and 49ers. Now, before we dive into it, there's been a little space in episodes, had a little family incident happen over the last few days, week and a half really. So kind of threw us off our schedule. Paige was traveling as well, so it made for some differing schedules to get a couple episodes done. But we're back, and we'll be back for the full slate of NFL coverage for the rest of the year. But Paige, looking at the week 4, what games are you looking at that bring you the most excitement for what should be a great week of football?
Yeah, I think that I'm trying to find the game that's like going to be a little bit different. I know people are mentioning the Chief Bucks game. My concern there is that the Bucks just haven't played good offense this year, and
No,
so
not at all.
I don't I don't know. I'm like, are we going to see like Tom Brady return to Tom Brady? Because right now, like through 3 games, it's like not been very exciting to watch the Buccaneers. Their defense is what's carried them through their games. But obviously, I have some stake in the game with the Broncos Raiders. I was pretty high on both of these teams 4 weeks
Yes.
ago. And even last week, I was still defending the Raiders, but they just look bad. And the Broncos, dare I say it, they are 2-1, but the Broncos look worse to me than the Raiders do. The Broncos look horrible, and I have no idea how they have won some
No.
games. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the team that's really the like loser goes home. Like in this, to me, it's like this is determinant of like who is actually gonna uh move up in that division and who's gonna be kind of last place at this point.
Yeah, I was able to rewatch the like a 30 condensed version of the Raiders Tennessee Titans game. Watching that back in the second half, it's just, and I'm sure, I caught the highlights of the Cardinals game where they played the Raiders, and then I saw the highlights of the week 1 Chargers Raiders game. And I can fully understand why Raiders fans are so adamant that they could be 3-0 at this point. Obviously, everyone knows the Cardinal game, it was 100% like a game that shouldn't have got away from them. But against the Titans, they were moving the ball up and down the field for a majority of the game. There were just small little things that caused them points in the red zone. Derek Carr pick on like the 5-yard line being a tip pass that got intercepted being one of them. So it's funny. One team's 0-3, the other one's 2-1. But I feel that the 0-3 team is the better team in that matchup. I think the
Agree.
Raiders are a better football team, and the percentages are really low. Obviously, since 1990, I think it's either 6 or 8 teams have started 0-3 and made the playoffs. So history's not on the side, although the last year, another team's been added, another game added. So you're going to see some altering of those stats. But nonetheless, you're looking at a situation where, I mean, they got to get going at some point. You can't dig yourself too big of a hole. So this is a make it break it type of game for a Raiders team that I do feel has a lot of talent, and they should probably beat the Broncos. If they don't, I think we're all just kind of hyped them up a little too much anyway.
Yeah, agreed. It's like, especially with, I don't know, it's like Russell Wilson has just been playing crappy. I mean, he obviously he had the game winning touchdown drive against the 49ers on Sunday Night Football, but it hasn't been impressive football. It looks like a broken team. Nathaniel Hackett doesn't seem to, it's like first year coaching woes, which I can kind of understand, but it just seems like he doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, well, and then they hired the guy from the Baltimore Ravens to handle like events in a game, so timeout management, situational awareness, going forward in certain situations. So the guy be in his ear to help him make those decisions. Which, you know what, credit to a guy to be able to look at something that he's failing in and quickly get a fix to it. You have to commend that. But it's also funny to me because that's what I view a head coaching primarily the job being is the game manager. So it's funny that a head coach had to get someone to help him be. And you mentioned Tampa Bay Bucks. The one that I think that honestly think will be one of the best games of the day is the Jacksonville Jaguars playing in Philadelphia against the Eagles. It's a one
That's going to
o'clock
be an
kickoff
exciting game.
time. What are you looking forward to most in that game?
I don't know. Or the Jaguars last year's Bengals?
I think so. Oh,
I
I
think
don't know
that
about that, but I know that they're a playoff team. I think they win that division.
agreed. I mean, it's just crazy. I think that we had kind of like set on that of like, there is a chance that the Jaguars kind of have like they have a awesome quarterback who's in his second year. Like this could be the year he starts to shine. And so I just think it's pretty exciting to see what the Jaguars are doing. But yeah, I think that game is going to be so fun. I think that's a really great matchup, especially two offenses that have been balling out the past 2 weeks. But not only that, two defenses that have really stepped up in the last couple of games. And so I'm excited to see that one. The Eagles seem to be really capitalizing in the first half of games. And so I'm interested to see if they carry on that, if Jalen Hurts able to keep up his accuracy and just kind of see if they're able to kind of tip that over. I think they're going to need to score some more points in this game against the Jaguars than they've had to win their last couple of games, sitting at 24, the last two wins. And so
Also, yeah,
I'm
like
just
you
so
said, all
stoked about
scored in
that
the
game.
first half. Really weird.
Yeah.
You don't see that very
Very
often.
interesting stat. Yeah. And so I'm just excited to see those two go at it. It's like two really awesome teams right now. The Eagles to me look like they're undefeatable right now. They just look so good. But I think that if the Jaguars, I think the Eagles, where the teams have failed that have played the Eagles is not being able to capitalize on opportunities that were presented to them. I mean, we talk Vikings game, a blocked field goal and an interception that didn't capitalize into any points for the Vikings. And so I think if the Jacksonville Jaguars are able to make big plays and capitalize on those, that's where they're going to take the edge over the Eagles.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think with the Eagles scoring being such a quick start, one, you just can't bury yourself. And you got it. And I believe Doug Peterson, I think, is showing how good of a coach he is, and how well he handles quarterbacks and brings them up. Obviously, with Carson Wentz, he led him to almost an MVP season back in 2017. With Jalen Hurts, not that he's has really gotten him to the point, but he picked him out, drafted him, and actually played him on the back half of his last year in Philly. Part of the reason they actually got fired. So I think there's a lot to like with the Jacksonville Jaguars coming into Philadelphia. That defense has given up a shutout 2 weeks ago, which in the NFL to shut anybody out is impressive. And then last week, only giving up 10 points to a Chargers team that many picked as a sleeper Super Bowl contender. So are they the Bengals of last year? I think it's there. So I do think that there's a chance that they could be last year's Cincinnati Bengals, right? One thing that you got that I think is important when it comes to a team making a run is having the confidence going into the postseason and having a home playoff game. So with the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think they'll run away with the division personally. I think the division's pretty weak. I rewatched that Colts game, and I don't know how they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. The Texans are terrible, and I don't think the Titans really are all that good too. The Raiders should have won that game as well. So I think that the Jacksonville Jaguars are running away with that division. So will the Eagles on the flip side. So I think this presents probably their best matchup, best type of game to give them a real good test here for the next few weeks.
Yeah, agreed. And speaking of the Cincinnati Bengals, they just got a major stop in this fourth quarter. They just stopped Miami just punted the ball, so Bengals are getting it back up 3.
Yeah, I think that they'll end up winning that game. It's tough. Talked that we were watching it live. The NFL is going to find them an interesting situation with Tua against the Bills, obviously getting hit pretty hard. Everyone saw that his head snapped against the turf. He got up wobbling, and this is nothing news to anybody, but to have the game immediately follow, which is a short week, and then to have a moment where he's obviously concussed and he does what they call fencing, is when your body locks up. And there's been a few players that we've seen this happen to over the years. It's a tough look. The situation was already under investigation by the NFLPA, but this will just make that investigation all more prominent. And I think, honestly, with this being a primetime game, a lot of people having seen it, I think you'll see some institutional changes in the measuring required for such a quick turnaround from playing Thursday or Sunday afternoon and then playing Thursday night. I think that there's going to be specific guidelines put in place that you're going to have to pass cognitive tests in order to be cleared to play on essentially 4 days, 3 days rest, 4 days later.
Well, yeah, and it's rough too because a lot of from the footage on Sunday, it looked like it was a head injury, and then later this week, obviously, we've gotten information that it wasn't the head that they were concerned about, that it was that his back that had been spasming. But it's just not a good look when it looks clearly like there's a head injury, and then you see on a primetime game him go down and have that lockup. That was a scary footage to see, and you just with head injuries, it's so worrisome to see that. And so, yeah, I agree that it's going to be, and I think it doesn't help that not like Tua's situation to me is a little bit more intense, but we've also got Justin Herbert playing a week after he had some pretty serious rib injuries, and you could tell he was in pain. He didn't look as good on Sunday. You could tell that he wasn't moving the way that Justin Herbert usually moves, and that he was
Right.
in a lot of pain throughout the game. And so I think that overall it's just going to open up conversations about like the safety, the protection of our QBs, protection of players, and putting their health above anything else.
Yeah, no, 100%. Um, in terms of the other games, moving to back to the Sunday slate, what's a game? I'll give you this. I'm gonna put this category out there for you. Okay, so I have 3 contestants for you. You let me know which one fits the mold best. I'll call it like the least amount of points scored / shown the least amount on red zone. So that's kind of like the whole general category. You have the Steelers. Now, granted, the return of Zach Wilson for the Jets will be on Sunday, so that'll be a little bit of excitement. But Jets, Steelers, Bears, Giants, and Titans, Colts. Which one of those 3 games is going to be shown least on red zone to the point where you forget that it's even happening? I have mine.
I'm going to go with I think the Jets Steelers.
That'll be shown least? Yeah. Yeah, I think the Steelers pretty good.
I just think that Steelers defense is pretty good. Steelers offense is pretty disappointing. And so it's like not that the Jets defense is great, but I think it's going to be a pretty low scoring game and just a lot of punting. So I don't anticipate that being shown a lot. I think, and the reason I'm saying that is because I believe in Nick Vrabel too much to think that the Titans won't ball out on these Colts teams right now. I think that the Titans will score. I think that that's going to be a fun game. And then Bears Giants. Obviously Bears sitting at 2-1 is just confusing. I think absolutely everyone, but I think that the Giants have they've been playing good. They obviously lost last week, but I think we'll see some exciting moves from Saquon Barkley. So I think we're going to see the Giants on red zone.
Yeah. I mean, what's hilarious is that walking away from this week, either the Bears or Giants, one of them has to leave the week 3-1. Kind of crazy. I'm going to shift, and I think that one's going to be the one that's shown the least on red zone. Justin
Fields is going to throw 3 passes.
He's completed 23 passes in 3 weeks.
It's insanity.
I don't know if the stat still stands, but as of week 2, or was it week 2? Yeah, it was after 3 weeks. 3 weeks of football. He out of 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, he was 33rd in attempts and completions.
It's like
I
Tim
mean,
Tebow or Taysom Hill football. Like,
but you don't, yeah, it's backwards. The defense is pretty stout, and I think the Giants' defense is opportunistic. Daniel Dimes on the other side, we had to endure that on Monday Night Football. And credit to him, I mean, his offensive line didn't give him any help against a tough Cowboys front. But regardless, I think those 3 games, the 11 o'clock for us, 1 o'clock Eastern time slate, it gets a little rough. I think like we already talked about the Jaguars, Eagles, but then you got Browns, Falcons, Commanders, Cowboys, and then Bills, Ravens. So really, you got two, like already week 4, you can kind of start seeing the separation of teams just enough to where you know where you should probably pay your attention to. Um, obviously with the things that happened last week, we didn't get a chance to recap and talk about the Lions, but they play in Detroit against the Seahawks. My impression walking away from the Lions is I think they're going to be pretty tough. And more so than last year, because I think they're going to close out a lot of those football games because I do feel the talent is there a lot more. I think that they end up, if you want to do bold take of the week, I think they're going to end up beating the Seahawks by 2 or more touchdowns
I
because
agree.
that offense is pretty potent, and there's nothing on Seattle minus DK Metcalf that gives me any worry or any like thought that the Seahawks can move the football.
Are you saying that you're writing off Geno Smith?
And he isn't right back this time, or maybe he will
Um,
because he trademarked that, and it's been all downhill since.
yeah, I agree. I think the Lions are going to walk away with that win pretty easily. And I think that the Lions are in one of those sweet positions this year, especially Dan Campbell, where they can take a lot more risks than a lot of teams can in their play calling and in their play strategy because nobody expects them to be like a playoff contender in terms of a Super Bowl this year. But they are good enough that people do like want them to take risks and win
Yeah,
football games. And
yeah,
so I just think that that's where they kind of had their sweet spot this year. And I think that that's why Dan Campbell's able to do things like go for like 6 4th downs, go for it on 6 4th downs in a game against the Vikings, which they almost pull out a win. And so I just think that we're going to see more of that risk taking from Dan Campbell. You could see that he regretted in the post conference game after the Vikings win, he regretted not going for that 4th down and attempting that field goal that they ended up missing. And so I just think that that's going to fuel Dan Campbell this week. And we're going to see, I bet he's probably going to pull out an onside kick. He's probably going to pull out these weird little things that Dan Campbell likes to do with this Lions offense that I think will ultimately be to their benefit. And I think that they're going to come out on top of the Seahawks. But I think that maybe the NFL put up some of these kind of boring matchups because we have 2 like insanely exciting games that I think are going to be super fun. And they just didn't want to overwhelm us with too much red zone switching because that's what the Jaguars and Eagles being at that 11 a.m. slot, as well as the Bills Ravens. The Bills Ravens is one of the games I am most excited for just because I'm one of those people that I love a good offensive game. And I just think we're going to see a great offensive game between these 2 teams. I'm just excited to see Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen kind of go head to head and have some really awesome throws and just fun touchdowns.
yeah. I think it's a pretty important game for both teams, right? When you eliminate, as we've talked about before, when you eliminate the second seed by where now it's just the number 1 seed, and you start playing these games early on in the season, first weekend of October, they start meaning a ton because this game can carry on for 2 teams we expect to be competing for that final, that number 1 seed only by. And it's in Baltimore, which gives them a pretty good advantage. They got a pretty good home field advantage there in Baltimore. I still see the Bills pulling it out. I mean, they should be 3-0. There's a lot of dumb things, not being able to clock it twice before the end of the first half and into the second. And being stopped in the goal line, not being able, I mean, they ran 90 plays on Sunday against the Dolphins. 90. And you're telling me, I mean, you look at that box where the Dolphins only ran 39, if you flash that stat in front of me, I thought that the Bills would have won 42-6 or something
Mm.
like that. So I don't think lightning will strike twice. As good as Lamar has been, the secondary for the Ravens has been toasted. I mean, Mac Jones was truly moving the ball up and down the field, and they were able to have a lot of success. And we already know what Miami did to them. So I think Josh Allen with Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, and that offense are just going to move the ball up and down at will. And Lamar will match it punch for punch. I just think it's going to be really hard because there's questions on if the Bills secondary will be there to play. They signed longtime Viking Xavier Rhodes. He was reunited with Leslie Frazier, who was there with him at the beginning of his career. So I think that they'll start get healthy and shore up that back end. The defensive line for the Bills is really good. They'll probably be a good game plan to corral Lamar as best as possible because it's impossible to do it fully. And I think that the Buffalo will squeak out a win there. But you're right; it's gonna be one heck of a football game, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, and I think that you could see it that it's funny being the person that has to say like the weather plays a role, but I think that there is something to say about playing in Miami in September. Like it's a different feel. And you could just see
Oh
that the
yeah,
Bills players were gassed by the fourth quarter. And so I think it's great that those teams with the rivalry that they have and being that they have the opportunity to play in each other's fields at the extremes of their seasons because Miami has
yes,
to go back up to the Bills in December and play in the frigid cold. And so it'll kind of even out that way. But yeah, I agree. I think that, and also I just think that the Bills are too good of a team. I mean, the first 2 weeks, the other teams had no chance. And so I think that them coming off of a loss to the Dolphins, like that's not going to sit well with Josh Allen. And you know that he's been just sitting, he hasn't gone a minute without thinking about Sunday's game. And so I just know that he's going to come out and ball out. And I think that it'll be fun. But I do agree that I think the Bills are going to come out on top.
yeah, yeah. I
But
think
I need Lamar to just score another 49 points for me in fantasy, though.
that's the only chance. That's the only chance you have. The Browns Falcons is a game that interests me because obviously, if you're a Browns fan, you're sitting there thinking we should be 3-0 from that week 2 disaster. However, as a team, you're just looking at we have just got to tread water until Deshaun Watson gets back. That's the entire mentality that they have. So they're playing the Falcons in Atlanta, and the Falcons' offense has proved to be Marcus Mariota has proved to be potent. They've been scoring points, actually a lot of fun to watch, and they've been in every single one of their games as well. So this should be one that is kind of one that slept on a little bit, but turns out to be an actual really fun football game. I think there's going to be a good amount of points. But looking at what the Browns have ahead of them, they got the Falcons this week, then they play at home against the Chargers, but the Chargers are decimated with injuries, and that's the very interesting about football is when you look at the beginning of the year and you're like, "Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one," and it still is going to be a challenging game for them, but certain things break in certain ways that change the dynamics of a season. And the same is that they play the Patriots the week after at home, but that's more than likely going to be without Mac Jones, and Brian Hoyer is going to be under center. And so all of a sudden you're looking at a situation where the Browns could be 5-1 at the best case. I think at least 4-2. And all of a sudden, when you're at 4-2, you're about 4 or 5 games away from Lamar coming back. And it's like, wow, there's some real chance that the Browns are going to be the number one contender in the AFC when they get that all-pro quarterback back. So one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on just for the implications it carries down the rest of the season, and I think a game that will be surprisingly fun in that early window. Obviously, a game that lost some luster. The Patriots are traveling to Green Bay. It was reported that Mac Jones has a severe high ankle surgery, high ankle sprain that will more than likely need surgery. Is there any chance that Brian Hoyer can go into Green Bay and beat Aaron Rodgers and the Packers?
I mean, weirder things have happened.
That's true, but
I'm
not
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 I
many,
would I wouldn't put
not
money
much.
on I wouldn't put money on it. If I were a betting man, I guess it depends on how much money I have because it might be a fun bet to just see because if you win that could be pretty cool.
That would
But
be really
no, I think that I think that the Packers will put a smackdown on the Patriots this week.
Like pretty handedly.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. I unfortunately for me, as much as I hate seeing the Packers win, I think, that's the one thing is the two thoughts I had when you talk about easy schedule. The Eagles, I think they're going to be a strong contender for the number 1 seed. Just how the schedule plays out for them. They play on the road against the after the Jaguars this week, on the road against Arizona, which is just a funky team. We'll get to that. They play home against the Eagles, home against the Steelers, in Houston, at home against Washington, against Indianapolis, home against the Packers. It seems like a lot of their big games, much like the Vikings, as we've talked about before, are at home. Like even the Saints later on the season are in Philadelphia. It's very, very important. And so to build upon that thought, same as with the Packers. You look at the Packers' next list of games after the Patriots, which anytime playing Bill Belichick's going to be tough, but they play the Patriots at home, they play the Giants at home, they play the Jets at home, and then they're in Washington and then they face the Bills. So I'm looking at where the Packers are going to win the next 4. They're going to be 6-1 going into November, the middle of November or the end of October, and all that love and support of Aaron Rodgers can be right back to where it was, and he's going to be looking like MVP candidate because that slate of games, 3 of them at home against weaker opponents. It's not what you want if you're a Packer hater because it's an opportunity for all the wide receivers and Aaron Rodgers to get on the
Figure
same
it out.
page, which is unfortunate because that's the last thing that I want personally.
Just want continued failure for that team overall.
And you kind of glanced on a little bit the Bucks Chiefs game. Obviously, the Bucks games haven't lived up to the hype because the offense can't punch it into the end zone. What are you looking at this game? Obviously, can Patrick Mahomes what's the word? That Super Bowl loss a couple years ago. Can he exercise some demons and, put a beat down on a team that caused him a lot of problems in that Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like obviously the talk all offseason, once Tyreek Hill left for Miami, was what is Patrick Mahomes going to do without Tyreek Hill? What does that offense look like? And while the Chiefs still look really good, I think I think you can admit that he is missing Tyreek Hill in terms of like huge explosive plays that Patrick Mahomes was throwing last year. And so like you can't replace the speed of Tyreek Hill. And because of that, you're not going to be able to replicate the same style of play and the same length of plays. Like you're not going to get the same yardage. And so I think that the one thing that is interesting about this game is that the Bucks defense is so good. Like they are
Yeah.
so insanely good that I don't think it's going to be a high scoring game. But I trust in Patrick Mahomes enough that I think that and Andy Reid enough that they're going to find a way to capitalize. I think the biggest piece on that is I think that if the Chiefs defense is able to step up and get a turnover or 2 in this game, then that's what's going to propel them over the finish. It's up to the defense of the Chiefs to make sure that the Chiefs have the ball enough times and that they can drain the clock enough. Because I mean, I don't know. I'm like, maybe this is the week that all of a sudden the Bucks offense looks a lot better, but I just don't think that that's the case with what we've been seeing. It looks like they're still really missing Godwin. Obviously, we do have Mike Evans returning this week, which is also going to be a big play for the Bucks. But yeah, I think it'll be a good game. I'm choosing the Chiefs in this one, but I think majority of my life I've regretted betting against Tom Brady. So we'll see on Sunday night if that was a good decision.
Yeah. I think that the Chiefs had their game against the Colts of a moment of just the weird stuff happening. Like I said, I watched the condensed version of that game, which I enjoy doing because it gives you the game flow, because highlights just show you the big parts of it. But the beauty of football is there's so many first and second downs that get in, like that build up to those big plays on either side. And so I watched it looking back and I'm like, how did they lose to the Colts? Like it was one of the weirdest. And talking about the Colts, you glanced over it, but Matt Ryan looks done. I mean, the guy looks old, can't make the throws. I don't know. That's going to be a rough year for him.
I think the rest of the season, I'm going to be wondering, like, how did they beat the Chiefs?
The rest
of the season.
Yeah, like the Chiefs could lose this game because it's Tom Brady and it's the Tampa Bay defense. It's in Tampa. There's a lot of things working against them, but the biggest thing they have working for them is the best player in football, Patrick Mahomes. And there were a lot of plays that the Kansas City Chiefs missed on Sunday that I think they watch back. And it's human nature, even though it's a big, it's only the third week of the NFL season. They had played a couple tough games. The Chiefs did. They go into a team that just got shut out by the Jaguars, and they're not a division rival. They're not someone they really see a ton, even though they are in conference. So, it just was, I think, a letdown spot for them.
Well,
You don't get a letdown spot on Sunday Night Football against Tom Brady. And so I
and
think
that's
Patrick
the
Mahomes
thing.
want to make plays.
Is that the one thing I've been thinking about all week is I'm like, do you think it's one of those cases where like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs had kind of just like surpassed, like they didn't let themselves think about the Colts very much because Patrick Mahomes has been thinking about the Super Bowl rematch that's happening. Like, I do think that that's a possibility of like sometimes as a player, like when you're playing a team that you don't really care for, it's probably easy to just kind of like forget about the upcoming week and think like, okay, we'll have that one handled. Like it's Matt Ryan. Like I'm going to be thinking about my strategy against Tom Brady. And so I do wonder if that plays a role in the mental state of the players of thinking ahead to the next bigger game rather than the one that they have facing them.
No, and obviously I never dealt with it on any like high professional level where their lives are completely different. But I mean, there are times in high school and college sports where you get off a big game against like teams, people that you hate, people that you have, that are your rivals with, where the stadium is packed and everyone has the adrenaline running, and then you show up a couple days later and it's quiet. There's not a ton of people there. The music isn't really loud, and it's like, okay, like I guess we're playing, but your heart's just not into it. And I think it's impossible to be playing at 100 all the time. And so naturally you're going to get ebbs and flow. And that's why, it's very important that you just hang around long enough to pull out the win in the end. Because if you just play close enough football in those games that you don't play and execute very well, Patrick Mahomes is going to win you a lot of football games. Like if you just give him the ball, if you get to the end of a game and you say, all right, Patrick Mahomes has a ball with a chance to win at the end of the game, you're like, okay, I'll take that. Not every time. I feel as a Kansas City Chief fan, like I'll take that every time. I trust that he's going to get it done because, like you saw in the AFC division round against the Bills, 13 seconds left or 23, whatever it was, he got it done. So there's nothing to be really concerned about with the Chiefs. I honestly, I think the Chiefs go out and beat the Bucs. It's not going to be some blowout, but I think Patrick Mahomes is ready to put on a show. Is this his first primetime game of the year? Because who'd they play week one? It was just in Arizona. It was like a late window game. And then who'd they play week two? I can't even remember. No, they played Thursday Night Football against the Chargers, so that was a prime time. But Sunday Night Football is like the game. Like Thursday Night Football is kind of especially new at the Amazon Prime. They were week one. People still trying to log in. They didn't know where to find the game. Sunday Night Football is the game that is the most watched. It is like what everyone finishes their Sunday night with. So this is a big moment for him to kind of ball out and let everyone know, like, hey, I'm still the guy in this league. I know you like your flavor of the month with Justin Herbert, with Jalen Hurts, like these guys that pop up, Lamar Jackson to an extent this year. I'm Patrick Mahomes. I'm a former MVP. I'm the best player in this league. I'm going to give it down those 4 or 5 touchdowns. This is kind of
big news in this game that we're watching. Bridgewater just threw a pick. So
yeah, you're a little bit behind because the Bengals just scored. So
come on, Amazon Prime.
I think. Did you pause it on a different device? Because I guarantee if you hit your thing forward, it'll bump ahead. Because there's no way my Amazon Prime is that happened a long time ago.
That's hilarious. Mine's moving in slow motion. Okay, well.
So
you'll get Zach's original reaction, and then my reaction will come 4 minutes later.
There'll be a separate podcast for that.
Just wild. Bengals are balling. They're gonna beat the Dolphins here.
And obviously, we talked about the story coming out of it, but it finished. Joe Burrow threw a pass to Hayden Hurst from the 2-yard line, make it 27-15. The Dolphins have the ball. They don't have any timeouts. They're on the 50, but So obviously the Bengals will probably wrap this up unless they finish with some type of Cleveland Brown collapse. Obviously, you kind of wonder how long Tua is going to be out. And then for the Bengals, I mean, things are starting to come together for them. The offensive line played relatively well, better than they have. They have a little mini bye because they don't have to play till the 9th of October next Sunday against the Ravens in Baltimore. So they put their feet up, get to rest, watch the Ravens and the Bills battle, and then and prepare for them next week. So the Bengals seem to be getting their feet underneath them. And in a season that they really should be 3-1. I mean, that week 1 game against the Steelers, their long snapper doesn't get hurt. They win that in regulation. So I think they feel pretty confident about where they're at. And I mean, why wouldn't you have Joe Burrow and the offensive weapons that they have? I think things are coming together.
Yeah, and I think they should stick with these white uniforms. I think this is one of the best
Oh,
uniforms in football.
with the white helmet, they debuted that first time tonight. That thing looks so good.
Yeah, one of the best uniforms in football for sure.
Oh my gosh. So
Clean.
let's wrap up with the Monday night football matchup
Rams
between
49ers.
and I don't think we could have watched a worse Sunday night
Oh,
football game that
painful.
Jimmy Garoppolo and the Niners rolled out last week. But what
But
what are you
also,
thinking? What are you
this
thinking?
is this is my thing is that like every year offensive playbooks change and coaches make different decisions. And Jimmy G was kept out a lot of those conversations because they're
Oh, no,
not
no,
going to
not a lot, all of them. He didn't
he's
he
like
didn't roll back in until the week 1.
well, and it's like he's not gonna have access to any of that playbook when they're anticipating getting rid of him and sending him to
Yeah.
another offense so that he can give them their secrets. And so it's like Jimmy G comes out here having one of the weirdest off seasons of all time, I would say.
Yes.
And then Trey Lance gets hurt. He gets thrown in a game. He wins. He has 1 week to prep, to truly prep to play. And that was just a weird Sunday night football was weird. Obviously, he has his own fault safety in the end zone, which is just kind of funny. Not near as bad as some of the on fault in safeties things that we've seen in the NFL before. But I just think that like we got to give the guy a little bit of a break. Like he's just taking on this whole new role that wasn't like half of his brain was thinking he was going to be on another team. And so I think that we're going to see Jimmy G back at a kind of more Jimmy G style of play. Which is like obviously not the greatest football player ever, but he's going to be productive. He's going to get stuff done. I think him and Matthew Stafford at this point are a pretty even match in my eyes in terms of their efficiency. And so I think it'll be a fun game. I'm just hoping for like a better scoring game, some more excitement on offense. And then I just want to see some Aaron Donald. I just want him to see him like do some weird stuff, not obviously hurt Jimmy G, but I want to see him like chase Jimmy G around the field and scare him a little bit.
Yeah, obviously last year they met 3 times, the last one being in the NFC Championship game where the Los Angeles Rams won 17-20. I do remember last year, I believe it was a Sunday night football game, maybe it was Monday night, where it was in San Francisco. The Niners had gone on a little bit of a slide, and then the Rams rolled into town, and it was the first game Odell Beckham that was playing for the Los Angeles Rams. And the very first play, they hit him like on a quick smoke screen. But on the first drive, Matthew Stafford tried to air it out to Odell, and it got picked off. And then the San Francisco 49ers just put the beat down on it. What was the score? Yeah, 31-10 was the first matchup in San Francisco. And then they met on the last week of the year, and it was for the division. Or it wasn't. It was the San Francisco 49ers beat them 27-24, but then the Cardinals won, so they ended up. It was the division was between the Cardinals and the Rams. That's where I'm getting confused. But anyway, so historically in the regular season, Kyle Shanahan has owned Sean McVay. Like I think they have a 4-game winning streak in the regular season. Yeah, the 23-20 in 2020, and then 24-16. So they're the last 4 the 49ers have won in the regular season. Obviously, the Rams just won the most important one last year. But I think that the 49ers will probably beat the Rams. I haven't seen anything from the Rams that makes me think that they're anything close to what they were last year.
No, agreed. They're just not they're not the same team. They're not playing the same way, and they're not playing the same teams. I think is the biggest thing is that all of these teams have developed. They know how to beat the. I just think that the teams have developed strategies that they know how to beat the Rams now, especially with the weapons that the Rams lost. And so I think we'll see the 49ers on top. Jimmy G will smile again.
Are you saying that just because you think he's handsome?
No, I'm not. I'm not a big Jimmy G fan. He's not like obviously he's handsome, but he's not my type.
Is he too handsome?
Too handsome for me.
Too chiseled? The jaw's
Too
just too the
chiseled. I'm
jawline's
more,
too perfect.
yeah, I'm more of like a Saquon Barkley kind of guy. Gal, I mean.
Wow. He's a handsome man too. I cannot
next
lie.
next episode, we will list our top 10 hottest players in the NFL.
Yeah, I'll be a part of that as well. The other games that we really haven't touched on, the Cooper Rush era, 3-0 or 3-0 as a starter, 2-0 this year. There's been some talk from Cowboy Land, Dak Prescott not ruling out a return. He got the stitches out of his thumb. I think it would be, I don't know what the stronger word than idiotic is without getting offensive, but it would be one of the dumbest things that they did. If they're obviously they can win games without Dak Prescott. It's at home. It's against Washington. Just let Cooper Rush go out there, manage game, and see how long you can tread water because you don't even have to go back that far. You just got to go back to last year when Russell Wilson came back after 3 weeks or something from not the same but similar thumb injury and was terrible for the first 4 weeks after coming back because he wasn't healthy. So if you're winning and you're not, the boat isn't sinking, then just don't worry about it. Let Cooper Rush go out there. He could beat the Washington Commanders. He beat a better Cincinnati Bengals team at home. So he can get the job done. Let him continue to get the job done. I don't know what your thoughts on that, but obviously Carson Wentz era got off to a strong start, and it's kind of fallen off a little bit since.
Yeah, and I agree with you that I just don't think that this is the game that you risk bringing Dak back too early and risk him getting hurt more, especially because Cooper Rush is playing well. But not only that, it's like I think one of the coolest things and one thing that I really like about Dak Prescott is that he is involved in these games. Like he is not letting himself sit idly on the sidelines. Like you see him, he's got the headset on, he is involved, he's cheering, he's high-fiving, like he's a part of that team. And that team knows that Dak is their leader. And so I think that with the respect that he has from his teammates, the respect that Cooper has for him, I just think don't risk it. Let Dak get fully healed. You're winning football games. Let him get fully healed before you bring him back.
Yeah, and there's no one in Dallas that thinks what you're seeing from Cooper is better than what you see from Dak.
Yeah.
I
No
mean,
one's and if they are thinking that, then they don't know football very well, to be
no,
honest. It's
because
like
I I think what Cooper Rush has done is given himself a 10, 12-year Chase Daniel type career in the NFL. I think that's awesome because he's shown he could come in, doesn't ruin football games, and he wins big games. I mean, obviously 3-0. So it's like, don't ruin a good thing and what you have going for your team just because you want to get your really highly paid, expensive quarterback. Because all that matters is that you're winning and to get that high investment. Because what the worst thing you can do is rush him back when he's not healthy, and then all of a sudden he loses a game because he wasn't making the correct throws or he couldn't put the same velocity on it. And then Dallas Cowboy fans aren't very patient, even though they haven't had anything in 30 years. They're not patient, and all of a sudden now you're going to start hearing chatter about Cooper Rush. So
mhm.
I just don't see why you would do that. Cardinals Panthers, kind of an interesting matchup. Baker Mayfield, Kyle Murray, obviously their history, both 1-2 teams. I honestly think that the Panthers are going to go in. The defense a little bit better than what I've seen from Arizona, so I think the Panthers are going to go in and win. I don't know if you have a strong opinion on that game. I do
I don't
think it's
know.
going to be pretty interesting.
I think that I'm like a little bit angry. Not I'm not that invested in the Panthers, but I was expecting the Baker Mayfield Panthers team to just be a lot better than it has been. And so I feel like I'm like underwhelmed by their performance. And so I could see either of these teams pulling it out. I think Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield are kind of actually a fun matchup in my eyes. I think that this could be a fun football game, but I think I'll go with the Cardinals on that one.
Yeah, and you could sway me either way. I just haven't seen anything from the first half of the Cardinals so far that makes me think they have a competent game plan put together. But yeah, I mean, it's Baker, it's Matt Rule. They haven't won a lot of games recently, so I could definitely see it being the other way too. And then the last one, I think we haven't really. Well, we obviously the Vikings Saints 7:30 in the morning. But if you want to hear our breakdown of that, check out our Skull Edition podcast where we cover the Vikings extensively. We'll cover that game and what we think of it for the Vikings. But the last one would just be, I believe, Chargers Texans. We didn't really touch on it, but kind of a very interesting spot for the Chargers. You know, they started 1-0. They had the Thursday night game where they were clearly playing at the level or better than the Chiefs most of the game. Had a pick six that went the other way on a bad read between the wide receiver quarterback, and then they just get obliterated at home by the Jacksonville Jaguars. So their season, all of a sudden, obviously injuries have racked up for them, but I feel like you say that every year with the Chargers. Man, if they were healthy, they'd be right there. But they got to they got to go in and beat the Texans. Like I think you cannot start 1-3.
No.
Obviously, Justin Herbert isn't healthy, but no one is. But if he's playing that bad, you got to sit him.
Yep.
That's why you have a backup quarterback like Chase Daniel. But what do you think? I mean, they have to win the game. I don't think that, you can go in and lose the 0-3 Texans or else the season quickly
Hey,
is going to get out of hand.
0-2-1 Texans, sir.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's my bad. That's on me. The only 0-3 team is the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think this is it's kind of like that same mentality of like Broncos Raiders of like, this is a win or go home game. And it's kind of funny because so many people were hot on the Chargers of saying like, this is going to be like the NFC Bills, like they're going to be awesome. They're just going to crush everybody. And we just haven't seen that caliber of play from them. And so it's like, they have to step up. Like that's down to it of like, this team has a lot of promise in terms of the talent that they have. And so we'll see if they can put it together.
Yeah, and I think that they're the media darlings, and so if they start 1-3, I think you'll start hearing a little chatter about Brandon Staley. The fan base in Los Angeles isn't strong enough to really start that going, but I think
It's
that would be
non-existent. I think there's like 4
yeah,
fans.
that is. All right, so I'll start from the top. Give me 60 seconds, and I'll give you my predictions for this week's game. Tell me when I'm good.
You are on the clock.
Obviously, the Vikings are going to put a beat down on the Saints. Like I said, check out our Skull Edition podcast where we will cover that in detail. We look at the Seahawks Lions. I think the Lions will get that done. I think the Steelers will beat the Jets at home, and I think you may see a little Kenny Pickett. I think the Giants will beat the Bears. I believe the Titans will beat the Colts because Matt Ryan is just an old man. Then I believe the Chargers will beat the Texans. I think the Browns will beat the Falcons. The Cowboys will beat the Commanders. The Jaguars are going to beat the Eagles. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are for real. And they're going to put a beat down, not a beat down, but they're going to beat the Eagles. Doug Peterson gets his revenge. This one's a tough one. I don't trust that secondary for the Ravens, and I trust Josh Allen a lot more. I think the Bills are gonna beat the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Panthers will beat the Cardinals. They got the home field advantage there. I think the Raiders will beat the Broncos. The Packers will beat the Patriots. The Chiefs will beat the Bucks, and the Niners will beat the Rams.
Boom.
There you go. All right. What do you think?
All righty. I think the Vikings are going to beat the Saints. I think
Skull!
Lions. I think Lions over Seahawks, Steelers over Jets, Giants over Bears, Titans over the Colts, Chargers over the Texans, Browns over the Falcons, Cowboys over the Commanders, Eagles over the Jaguars. Believe in them, but I think it's going to be close at the end. I think the Bills are going to beat the Ravens, also in a close game. I think the Cardinals are going to come out on top of the Panthers. The Raiders, for the love, better beat the Broncos. Packers are going to put a smackdown on the Patriots. Chiefs will beat the Bucks in the Super Bowl rematch. And the 49ers will beat the Rams on Monday Night Football.
So we disagreed on 2. You got the Cardinals. I got the Panthers. And then I have the Jaguars and you have the Eagles. Everything else is the same. All right. And that's the funny thing is I could obviously see him go either way. But
Well,
how this all
the nice thing about football is we got a 50-50 chance of being right all the time in
that's right.
everything.
And the thing is I always think there's always like an upset a week, and a lot of people would, even though the Jaguars have shown that they can put a beat down, I think that would surprise a lot of people because the Eagles are definitely the kind of the team everyone's loving on early on in the year. So, all right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the His and Hers podcast, covering Week 4, previewing Week 4 of the NFL season. Again, His and Hers podcast can be found wherever you stream your favorite podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or other app. I think I submitted it on every single one. Ways, I don't know. There's a bunch of different ones. You could find it there, I promise. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tune in later on this week for our reactions to see how correct we both were on our opinions and to see me predict a perfect week. That'll be later on this week. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.
We'll see you next time.